Welcome in, everyone, to the 5 O'Clock Sweats podcast. I'm your host, Chris, joined by the usual crew, Ryan and Derick. This episode's topic of discussion will be a very controversial topic, but we're going to pose it as PC versus console gaming. I don't think at the end of this we're going to be able to identify which is king, but I think we're gonna kind of discuss both sides there of the coin. So let's get right into it, guys. First thing I sort of want to pose to both of you. First, what are you playing on currently? And what are your reasons for being on said platform, whether it be PC or console? And if it is console specifically, what console are you playing on predominantly? So we'll shoot it over to Ryan. I'll have you start.
Yeah, so I have been a console fanboy, for my entire life, ever since I started gaming on Nintendo, and now I've graduated all the way to a Xbox One Series S, which is basically the budget version of the newest generation of Xbox, and console for me. I started on Nintendo. Played the original Xbox a ton. But for me, console is just, you got the controller. It's easy to play. It's very intuitive. Obviously, different varieties of controller, and whatnot. But for me, I just the games on console for me are what kept me playing. And also, obviously, when we were growing up, consoles were the big thing. PC gaming really hadn't caught on. Nowadays, it's basically the tables have turned completely. PC is kind of the thing these days, especially with the technology and advancements on PC. But consoles these days, they've made strides to kind of keep up with the PC crowd a little bit in regards to FPS and performance overall. I know the current Xbox, the most state of the art Xbox is advertised to run at 120 frames per second at 4K. Right now, I'm running my Series S at 60 frames per second, and I'm pushing 1480p. Which, is for me is fine. I've never been like one to really be obsessed with graphics. Maybe when I was younger a little bit, because you could really see the leaps between generations of consoles. Like, oh, this looks so much better. But that, it's hard for it. I feel like it's hard nowadays to really see a new game and be like, wow, this looks incredible. We're kind of been spoiled with graphics. Mm-hmm. But yeah, going back to what I said about games, like the games are what have kept me on console, particularly the Xbox exclusives, the competitive first-person shooters. Everyone knows by this point I'm a big Halo fan. Big Halo fan.
Big Chief.
So, being an Xbox exclusive, I played, Halo 1 through Infinite, and, played Call of Duty as well. And yeah, I just never really, I know y'all, a lot of my friends play PC, and you've tried to lure me over to the dark side a little bit.
Whoa,
show me the light a little bit. Yeah. Listen, y'all with your fancy schmancy FPS, like 1,000 frames per second.
Okay.
Your 8K. Your light up keyboards and whatnot. Listen,
okay.
I respect PC.
PC.
It doesn't sound like it. You just named the most memed person on the internet.
I feel like so.
Does this keyboard look like it's lit up?
Personally attacked right now.
Listen,
so I'm gonna cool that down right now. So hold on for a second. So kind of going back to when you were making good points, I'm gonna go back to that. What do you think though? Like, I agree with you that years ago, right? Let's even say 10 plus years ago, maybe even more recently, there were a lot of games that, were only on console. that either didn't, weren't ported over or existing on PC, or the communities weren't as strong. I would say, like, go back to early Call of Duties, obviously go back to Halo. I know back in the day, Halo was on PC, but I think the community was a lot different, right? Xbox Live was the place to play Halo. But I think what's so interesting nowadays, and probably, to your point, why PC gaming has become a little bit more prevalent than it was, is because a lot of these games are now cross-platform, right? So, they're within all consoles, but now they're also on PC, let alone cross-save and cross-play, right? So there's a lot of like new integration. I remember even like 4 or 5 years ago, that was like my barrier to building a PC and transitioning from Xbox, is that like, all the games that I want to play were still mostly on Xbox, but the big thing is like, oh, I don't want to leave my friends. If I build a PC and then I play said game, like I might not be playing with them because it's not cross-platform. So I think advancements in that have kind of, made that transition easier. But I definitely agree with you that I think a lot of the games early on were what drew probably a lot of us, and I'm sure a lot of the audience, the people listening, to consoles. But good points. So we're going to come back to that, Ryan. Derick, I kind of want to hear from you. So tell us, what are you playing on currently? And kind of why? What's your reason for it?
Yeah, so I think right now I'm more heavily leaning towards PC. I don't play a ton of games right now, but the games that I do play, I am playing a lot of them. I'm playing a lot of Counter-Strike again, which has been nice. Mm-hmm. I play Rocket League if I just kind of want to mindlessly kill some time. And, some assortment of other games on the PC. But I also have a PS5. I use that to mainly play the Formula One game. And that is a very specific use case because when that, or was it last year's game? It might have been F1 2021. When that came out, there was no cross-platform. And all the people I knew were playing it specifically on PlayStation.
Okay.
So I would have preferred to get the game on the PC, but just how it happened with the timing of their cross-platform or their cross-play, I ended up getting a PS5 for that. I also use that for like more social gaming. So sure. I have a group of coworkers that get together on Friday nights and play Rocket League and just kind of, shoot the breeze.
Yeah.
So it's good for that, just sitting down, casually hanging out with people.
I agree, and I think we'll all kind of try to figure out like a pros and cons list. What's best about console and and PC, but I do think that's a good point too. Is the social aspect. Console gaming obviously stems from back in the day, like couch co-op, right? And I think. I don't know so much about Xbox, but I think that PlayStation is still very dedicated to that, like that single player or even just like very cinematic experience. And obviously, sharing that with somebody, in your physical presence or even like what you were saying, like kind of like a more social gaming aspect.
I agree with that.
But I think that's kind of funny though. You wouldn't find many people that would build a PC for one specific game, but I wonder how many people have bought consoles for one or just even two specific titles. Yeah, exactly, Ryan. I think, not that F1 has exclusivity, but like that's just kind of like another conversation that we can eventually have. But I think that is like such a bad thing, and I'm really kind of happy with the direction things are going in the sense it's like you can play, it's not about what you're playing on. It's about the game you're playing. And then anyone can play with anyone. And I think, although that affects competitive integrity, I still think that's good overall for gaming is to allow gamers to choose, where or what platform they want to play on.
Right. So, and I think that's something big for me. I work from home. I've worked from home for the last 3 years. And the room that I'm in right now is where I work and where my PC is. So I needed things to lure me out of this room. So I just wasn't in here for, 16, 17 hours a day.
Absolutely.
So the things that I got were a Nintendo Switch, so I could, game on the go, or if
On
I
the
was taking
toilet.
it down to my parents' house. Yeah, I don't think I've done that.
Well, then you're missing out.
It feels like a
You're
weird
missing out.
secret to tell you that I haven't done that.
Yeah,
Are you even doing it right then?
Well,
No.
maybe. But like I have a projector and a PS5 in my my living room, so like those are the two things that keep me out there.
That's dope. I think it's funny because there was a point in time where I was like trying to get away from the console gaming on TV, right? Because from a technical standpoint, there's input delay and lag. It's not the most competitive setup. But like now I'm like reverting back where like I want to get a PS5. I want to play like single player story games on like our big TV out like in the living room, and just like you know what I mean? Like I kind of like I find myself wanting to go back to how I used to game.
Yeah, so there's a point there that I actually want to bring back to something that Ryan said. With the input delay and all that, I think that's why, I have the Switch and the PlayStation out there, because I don't need, beefed up hardware for that. Whatever input lag there is, whatever, poor frame rates I get, it doesn't really matter for what I'm playing out there. That's more for in here. But I think I'm also kind of an edge case, because I think Ryan's at least partially right. For PC people, they can get overly obsessed with frame rates and resolutions, like almost to a fault. Running 120 frames per second at 4K does not interest me at all. That sounds horrible. That sounds like I'm like driving my graphics card into the ground for no good reason. I have an ultra wide monitor in front of me, and I still play 1080p with most of my graphics quality bumped down just for performance. Yep. And I think that comes from my competitive Counter-Strike days. Just bumping down as much as I could to get that, competitive edge.
Yeah, I think that's probably like, if we were to start at some point talking about like a pros and cons list, I think that's absolutely a pro for PC gaming, and something that console gaming is still lacking is that ability to like completely tailor the gameplay experience to the way you want, right? You can choose to have better resolution, right? Higher frames, or better resolution, maybe lower frames, or vice versa, right? You can lower the quality, the visual quality, in an effort to boost frames. You can turn on and off different settings, right? There's, all sorts of motion settings that are totally trash in modern games. Motion blur, filmic grain,
oh my God,
all these
gross.
crappy settings that like,
Yeah,
and what's nice about a lot of the PC games is that, the settings menu is very robust. Consoles are starting to catch up a bit, like with FOV sliders, but they're not quite there. So, to your point, I think it's actually nice to have both sides there where you can do your casual gaming and just enjoy the game, right? You're not staring at an FPS counter like I am on all my PC games, right? And then I'm like bugging out. I'm like, why is it dipping? What's going, you know what I mean? Like, you're right. You get kind of like caught up in it versus just enjoying the game. Right? And at some point, it's all diminishing returns. Is your eye going to tell the difference between 120 FPS and 144 FPS? Probably not. I don't know. I would think that would take a pretty trained eye to notice that. And at some point, it just comes down to, is it fun or not? What you're playing.
Dude, I can't notice anything above like 60 frames. I still think looks great, and I've only played on 120 frames. Like maybe like I played some games of Halo at Derick's house on his PC, and I think that was running on 120 frames or so, or close to it. I mean, it felt smooth, but
144.
144. Okay. No, I'm kidding. And like I definitely
like it speaks
noticed
volumes that I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. But I definitely noticed like, if more fluidity and, smooth gameplay overall. But for me, like, I mean, me being the basic console boy, like if I can get 60 frames and lock it at 60 frames, I'm content. But maybe that's partially because I haven't fully experienced a 120 and above frame rate gaming experience.
Yeah, it's for sure different.
I think I know when I built a PC, like the first few months, like seeing games, and it depends what game you're playing. Like I was playing some more esports titles like Rainbow Six Siege, which is pretty easy to run. So like you're getting like pretty high frame rates. It's noticeably better. It's a lot smoother, and in fact, it almost at first is difficult because everything just feels so responsive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus what I was used to playing on an Xbox and on a TV. And again, who's to say which experience is better? But it is noticeable. I would say though that anything above 120 FPS I can't really tell the difference at that point. 60 to 100 plus is definitely noticeable. But like I said, I think around 120 and above is kind of that spot where like I can't tell,
Right. So I guess speaking of which, we've gone. Ryan's a console boy. I'm kind of split down the middle. Well, what situation you got going over there?
So I'm like 90% PC these days. I spent most of my life playing on PlayStations and Xboxes, so consoles, and then I would say right before actually the pandemic started, so this is end of 2019, starting 2020, I just said to myself, you know what, like I'm just ready. The games are kind of at a point where there's cross-play, cross-save, cross-platforms, so I'm like, this is the time to make the jump, and I built my first PC. So now we're getting to the point where it's getting a little old. So I'm like starting to kind of like piece together that new build. But yeah, for me, it's PC, and the big drive to go from console to PC was, a few things. Obviously performance. You have more control over performance, not only in the settings of games, but, in terms of the tiers of hardware that you purchase, right? You kind of know nowadays with the benchmarks, if I buy this graphics card, this is kind of what I can expect for this game, right? Or this CPU and graphics card, whatever. So I think that's kind of nice. I wanted to kind of take that next step. I did want to start experiencing a lot of games, mouse and keyboard. That was a pull for me as well, which is kind of funny because since I've sort of transitioned back to just using a controller in a lot of games, but there are some games that I really do enjoy mouse and key. So that was part of it. And, not that consoles can't do this, but like, obviously a PC is more than just for gaming, right? I'm watching Twitch on another monitor while I'm playing a game, listening to music, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just the ultimate multitasking machine. And not for nothing, but I was really excited to actually just build a PC, like, kind of theory crafting the build, picking out the components, and then actually, building it and like turning it on and it works. Like that was so intriguing to me, and it was such a great experience, and something I'm looking forward to for the next build, which hopefully happens in a few months. But I still do. I have my Xbox for one game and one game only. And Ryan knows this for MLB The Show.
Shout out MLB The Show.
The minute that they put that shit on PC, I will take this Xbox and probably,
Viking funeral.
Yeah, it's like just holding on for dear life, and I'm only keeping it around just for that one game. But
that's so funny, dude. Then you have no excuse to not be hitting dingers every at bat.
Oh my god! Well, that would be a little unfair, I think, at some point. If like you're seeing the pitch come in at like 144 frames per second versus the other guy who's seeing it at 30 FPS.
Oh my god!
Yeah, you have literally 4 times the information.
So. What I wanted to do, kind of going off of what I was kind of getting into right there, let's kind of just sort of go around here and let's list some pros of PCs. So we'll start with PCs and some cons, and then we'll kind of dissect the console as well. We'll do pros and cons of consoles. So let's just start with PC. Ryan, even though you don't play on PC, I'm sure you can come up with some ideas as to things that might be kind of more advantageous with the PC. I'll start. We'll just kind of go around the horn here. So I'll go, Derick will go, and then Ryan will go, and we'll just loop around until we run out of things. So I'll say first pro for me with PC gaming would be, all right, I'll say just control over settings. I think you have more customization there. Yeah. Derick? What do you think?
For me, it'd be I think you talked about it already, the versatility. Like I can use this computer for whatever, hobby I'm into that week.
Yeah, that's a great point. I really like the fact that it is like the do it all machine, where consoles still kind of lack in some areas in terms of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using it to record this podcast.
Exactly.
Make music sometimes. I edit this. I can do whatever.
Exactly. Ryan, what do you got? What could you say is a pro to PC gaming?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that, being a console man, it's hard for me to admit this, but no, I'm kidding. The
way
I think
you
just
said it.
the catalog of games that are available on PC is outrageous. Especially now, like we mentioned, with all the games being ported to PC. I think PlayStation still, I feel like all the Xbox games that come out these days are automatically on PC, cross-platform when they come out, and then PlayStation still has those exclusive releases, but those eventually get ported over to PC. Although, poorly, at least for now, until they refine that method. But can't tell you how many games I've seen over the last couple of years, especially during COVID, that, I saw on like social media. I'm like, oh, this game looks sick. I can't wait to try it out. And then it's like PC only. And I'm like, damn it.
If only you built one.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of have an addition to that point. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like, yes, the library is expanded, right? You have, there's a little bit more competition in terms of where you get your games from. And because of that, I find that like, you can get a lot of games, even newer games, like on sale on PC. Like it is rare that I spend $60 or $70 on a game, even like I said, a fairly new game. And that's because you have Steam, right? You have like the EA app, you have Epic Games, right? You have Blizzard or Battle.net, right? So there's lots of different kind of like, launchers that all sell games. So you can kind of look around all of them and get, certain sales. Plus, Steam, there's not much better than Steam. I mean, you're just talking about like frequent sales, for just specific games, but even like there's, yearly events that are sales and they're damn good usually. So I agree with that, Ryan. We'll circle back. I think I could come up with another pro for PC gaming. And I think it would probably be, let's see. I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying about customization. I think that also ties into the hardware. You could say that this is a con, but I think you have a lot of ability to fit your PC into various budgets, right? Now, there's probably not a lot of capable PCs that would be the same price as a console, but having said that, right, there's definitely different tiers, and you can build towards what it is you're seeking, whether it's building it for a specific few games, right? You know what benchmarks exist, so you can kind of build towards that. Or you can just go all out and just future-proof a rig and just, build it to last you 6 years and be, really good throughout that. So I think that's a pro to me, is just that ability for you to kind of build on whatever budget you want. It's a little less now after COVID or during COVID with these prices, but at one point in time, I think that was definitely a thing.
Yeah, for sure. That was what my last build was, really. I remember having that same case while I was in college. So it lasted quite some time for me.
Yeah.
But
and then you can actually, like you said with the case, right? You can actually like overlap and reuse components. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to always be a total rebuild. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can just be incremental upgrades, which is nice. Which I think, unfortunately, console still kind of lacks.
Right.
Ryan,
do you have another point, or should we start hitting the con list for PCs?
I got one more small one, but so the ability to just, if you are a PC gamer but you prefer a controller, you have the option to plug in your controller.
Versatility, baby.
Yeah, versatility. Like you can literally do it in the middle of a game. Like I know, like there have been streamers I watch that if they're sniping, they're like, okay, time to plug in the mouse and
Yep.
keyboard, and then when they're getting ready for like a up close battle or an up close gunfight, they're gonna switch their controller. Like it's pretty ridiculous that you can just do that on the fly like that. So definitely a plus.
It does. Yes, that is a little ridiculous, but it does take a lot of practice to be able to play on different inputs proficiently because they have different feels and they have different advantages to them.
Oh yeah.
But that's a great point. I agree with that. I think I'll kind of start the con list for PCs.
I still got some more pros, baby.
Oh, you do? Oh, let's run it. Derick, you go. I'm ready to just go right into roasting PCs.
Yeah, so this is something we've talked about before also, but storage is cheap.
Ooh.
Storage is dirt cheap. Like you can buy a, however many terabyte hard drive for what, $80-$100, and you, for the most part, don't really have to worry about compatibility. But I think it's something we've talked about before where, we're getting first party hard drives that are, for an Xbox specifically. And I think that's another advantage that PC has. Storage is cheap and versatile.
Yeah. And what's nice, again, kind of what I was saying about different tiers, right? There's different types of storage you can, there's the old hard drives, there's SSDs, but now they have the, the NVMe SSDs. So obviously as technology advances, storage is getting bigger in a smaller footprint, and you're right. You can buy a 2 terabyte SSD now for like probably under 200, definitely under 250. And I mean, it's going to be fast. And listen, that's like all you really need. I mean, I don't even have a hard drive per se in my PC. I just have a 1 terabyte SSD, and I probably spent like 180 on it. Whereas I know Ryan has this experience, but the Xbox, the expansion card.
You sound so broken.
The PlayStation SSD is like, it's branded, so it's like 60 to 70% of the console cost.
It was
just
insane.
to expand your storage, and it's like it blows my mind.
Yeah, my little storage card was basically half the price of my console.
Yeah. Crazy. Derick, did you have another one though? It sounded like you were ready to rip.
No, we can move on.
Okay. All right. So we'll circle back. I'm going to start the cons now. So these are some things that are, again, a lot of this could be subjective, but some downsides to PC gaming. They're few and far between, Ryan. Okay. But they exist. So I would say number one, probably would be this is a pro for console, a con for PC, but there can be quite oftentimes quite a bit of troubleshooting and tinkering, so to speak, involved with owning, maintaining, and using and operating a PC. Yes, for the most part, you turn it on and it does what you tell it to do. But, with all that customization comes lots of variables, right? There's so many different graphics cards, so many different CPUs, right? Different drivers for all of those things. Is your driver updated? Is it not? Blah, blah, blah. So, long story short, there can be lots of issues that you have with games, right? The same game can run differently at different times based on if you're updating things or if the game's been updated. So there's tinkering involved and some troubleshooting. And obviously just general PC problems arise. Whereas the console, you turn it on and you're good to go, right? The game's going to work and it's going to perform the same for you as it does for the guy next to you, as long as they have the same console. So that's what I would say would be one of the biggest cons that I can think of. But go ahead, Derick, what do you think?
Yeah, so this is something that I picked out when we were talking about storage too. But the bar for entry for building a PC seems like it's high if you don't know anything about it, right? I think being on the other side of building a PC, you kind of know after you've done it once, like, okay, it's basically like putting a puzzle together.
Sure.
But the bar for entry can be high.
Absolutely.
I know that there's a ton of acronyms in the tech world, and we hit a bunch of them: SSD, NVMe. Like, folks that don't know what those are
I have
really
no
don't
idea.
know what those are. Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds so intimidating, but it's like when you really think about it, there's like probably like 8 components that you really need to buy for a PC, and like that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
But it does.
And
It sounds
those are all acronyms too.
exactly. It sounds a lot crazier than it is. But yeah, you do the bar is really like cost, and especially during the pandemic. Again, you're talking about companies that have just seen what people will pay and are willing to pay for certain components, specifically graphics cards and processors. So, you've seen prices essentially double, to get like a mid to high tier GPU is, $900+, where that used to be the top of the line GPU that existed. And now that's getting you like, the second or third one down from the top.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's definitely, I think, a great point. Unfortunately, hopefully things change. But Ryan, what do you think? What could you come up with as a con for PC gaming? And this might be more applicable to you since you haven't kind of made that jump.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that learning mouse and key is the learning curve is way steeper than just
Okay.
picking up a controller. Because I mean, if you're a gamer, then you've used a controller for most of your life. At some point you used a controller, and they're pretty intuitive, joysticks, buttons, but mouse and key. I mean, I honestly feel like when I play mouse and key, it's like I'm trying to throw a baseball left-handed, and
Yeah.
I'm not left-handed. By the way, just want to clear that up. I'm not left-handed.
See, that was
It's
really interesting. When you were talking about console stuff at the beginning of the episode, and you said that it was intuitive. I actually don't think controllers are that intuitive. I know for the most part, left stick is movement, right stick is camera or, looking, right trigger, normally shoot, but
mhm.
D-pad, any of the 4 buttons on the right side, any of the bumper buttons, like it's hard to get to know it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel much more comfortable on mouse and key.
So I think usually, and this may be the case for mouse and keyboard. I honestly don't know, but typically across consoles and the different controllers, like the buttons are like the controllers themselves are the layout is basically the same. Like if you're taking like a PlayStation controller and an Xbox controller, like they may look a little different, but the button layout is pretty similar. And if you're playing, especially if you're playing like FPSs or shooters in general, the buttons are usually all doing the same thing across platforms. So like A is usually jump, X is usually reload, right trigger shoot, left trigger grenades, Y switch weapons. So I
Yeah.
think in that regard, like if you've played one, like if I played a lot of Xbox, if I wanted to, I could probably pick up a PlayStation controller and maybe it would take me like an hour or two to get used to it, but I would be pretty good. Whereas if I did play mouse and key. I have played mouse and keyboard for about an hour, and my improvement was very marginal. Like I still didn't feel comfortable moving. And like that's the biggest thing for me when I play mouse and keyboard is just moving and shooting simultaneously. Like I cannot get it down. Like it would take a lot of practice for me. If you locked me in a room for and you gave me some food, maybe some water if you were nice. Um, maybe a bucket. If you locked me in a room for a week, I could probably,
Jesus.
I could probably strafe and shoot. Kinda. I could probably do basic strafe left and right and shoot comfortably.
So
But I'll go ahead.
So I to kind of like interject there, I totally see exactly what you're saying and where you're coming from, and I think I can kind of attest because like I said, I gamed on console and controller for 25 years, and then made the switch to PC in the last few years. So learning mouse and key is difficult. It doesn't feel natural because you're literally gaming on something that was meant for typing. However, what I will say is this is I think it's very much feel. The two things that were hard for me were one, using my left hand like a lot, right? Because that's as a right-handed person, that's where your left hand is on the keyboard. So just actually like getting my fingers reaching and moving in those ways, like I would cramp a lot when I was learning because I just wasn't used to having my hand and fingers in those positions. But I would say the other thing is finding the keys without looking, right? Like, and that is just like typing. It's simply like the more you do it, it just happens. And kind of like you were saying about the feel of controller, I think they both sort of have the same issues where it's like you have to do something long enough to be able to not look and find what you're trying to find in terms of a button. But I found that like for me, I committed to only doing mouse and key, and I just gave up controller for like 2 years. And I got very comfortable on mouse and key, but it's like you're retraining the brain. And, I think controllers have gotten more like friendly kind of, Derick, in the sense that like they're more intuitive with the new paddles and stuff that they're starting to implement. Mm-hmm. I agree. I think, one of my issues I always had with controller is, unless you were changing button mapping like crazy or playing claw, right? There were a lot of situations where you'd have to take your fingers off of, very key important buttons to do some other function. You know what I mean? So that's kind of, to me, the advantage. And I think things have changed now with the implementation of all these, these back buttons or these back paddles that make everything like pretty seamless. So
Right.
I definitely see both of your points there. But sorry, Ryan, go ahead. I just kind of wanted to add that in because I think it ties into what you were saying.
Oh, no, you're good. Well, I just want to make it known that I've been typing on a computer for probably about 20 years, and I still find myself looking where keys are sometimes. So if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know, my adjustment to mouse and key would be a long and tedious process. But the controllers are they're built with the human hand in mind. And as a guy with not, I don't know, the largest hands in the world, stop showing off, man. Stop showing off. But like mouse and keyboard, left hand, trying to find the buttons and stretching like my pinky finger. I can't do. I find that to be the most difficult thing ever. Like I would never. That's why I would never play. What was it? Expert difficulty on Guitar Hero because of the pinky.
Oh shoot! I forgot about that conversation.
I don't want to get that pinky involved because it's just
that might be the title of the episode.
There we go.
I don't want to get
that pinky involved.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying though. Is it's like physically like stretching your hand. But that's also kind of a nice thing about PC though is the key binds like are endless. I mean, you can literally bind any action to any key that you want. Whether it makes sense is entirely up to you as the player. Ergonomics are a little bit of an issue, I think. I've never had more back problems than I do now playing on PC because I'm like literally into my keyboard and mouse, and I'm like 2 inches from the monitor. I'm just like, I'm so hunched over and just like, you know what I mean? Exactly. Sweating my ass off. So I would say maybe that's another thing is the ergonomics, at least for me.
I want to be really careful here that I'm not just defending PC for all the cons points, but I think the point was made that like across controllers, mostly buttons in the same position do the same thing. I think we have the same thing in PC, right? WASD is almost always movement. Control is almost always crouch. If it's not that, then it's C, or it's Z, depending on which games you played. Switching weapons can be Q or one of the numbers. Like that's another one of the things you just figure out.
Scroll wheel.
And you're also no. I was just gonna say that you are not allowed to change weapons with the scroll wheel. That is just not allowed.
It's gross.
You can't do that. I would never advise
it's too close
anybody.
to the trigger.
No, it's
not precise enough.
Exactly, it's clunky.
Is it too sensitive?
Sometimes you over like you'll literally swap back to the same weapon, or it's just inaccurate because sometimes the mouse wheel will also go into like other, like if you have gadgets or something. So it's, long story short, you use 1 and 2, or you just hold a controller. Right. That's the rule.
And one more rebuttal I have, because I did the math on this and it sucks for me. I started PC gaming 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
2003 was when Halo CE came out for the PC. And at that point, it was a port of Halo 1 that came out, 2 years before that in 01? So
that game was good, by the way. Yeah, that game was awesome.
So good. But now, if I think about the position that my hand falls just normally, it's, I can picture where my fingers land on the keyboard. Like it's always in the WASD and control position for me. So I think that that's another learned thing.
Absolutely. So, all right, I think we'll leave some stuff unsaid, but I think we kind of dissected the PC pretty good, at least for, the purposes of this episode. So let's transition over to console. Now let's kind of break that down. We'll just go in the same order here. So I'll start and we'll just go Derick, then Ryan. We'll start with pros of consoles, right? So these are benefits of playing or having or owning a console. So I would say what comes to mind for me for a pro of a console is you plug it in, you turn it on, you download the game or you insert the disc, and you know that it will play that game properly as it was intended to be played, right? You're not going to be dealing with too many issues, whether that's graphically or stability wise. And you know that the optimization is going to be pretty spot on. So you can just assume that the game's going to work. Whereas you don't always get that like in the PC realm. Sometimes you're like, oh, wow, do I meet the minimum requirements? Or, did I update this, that, the other thing? So, it's just kind of plug and play. That's the beauty of console. Derick, what do you think?
Kind of touching on the same thing. The hardware is very specific. So game developers know exactly what hardware their game is going to be running on, and they can, code for exactly that hardware.
Yeah.
And, that leads to the optimizations you were talking about, although sometimes they miss the mark there too. But yeah, I think that's something that consoles are good at, as well as, Apple iPhones. Like that's another advantage over Android that they have. All right, I shouldn't dive into that.
That's an whole other.
Man.
So I kind of want to touch on what you said, Derick. I really agree with that point. They're developing two very, you're right, very specific, very well-known, hardware. I would say what's kind of gotten a little bit more difficult, it used to be like you're building for this Xbox and like that is the Xbox that's current. Mm-hmm. But now, right, in an effort to prolong or extend the life of different console generations, you kind of see that it's like, we still are developing for the newest console, but we still have to make it work to some degree on, the older one. And then all the other ones in the middle there, right, which have different specifications. So it's like, it used to be you're building for one console, but like even if you're just talking about Xbox, like you're building for like probably like six.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? PlayStation's a little less because, they pretty much are just focused on the PS5. I'm not too sure how, are current gen games still available on PS4? Does anybody know that? I'm to be honest, I don't have a PlayStation, so I'm not too versed on that.
Sure
I think there was a cutoff at some point. I don't know when that took place.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be. And then that's kind of how it was growing up, right? It's like, okay, I got to get the PS3 because, they're not making games anymore, right, for the PS2. So it's like you felt like you had to. Whereas now it's like you can kind of just sit on it. So, yeah, good point, Derick. I agree. Probably a little bit more difficult than it used to be, though. Ryan, what's your pro for consoles? And then take it easy, all right? Don't give us like, what I mean? You're not selling.
No, I got a pretty basic one that actually is huge for me, and that is the portability of consoles. Like I can and as you mentioned, you have your console and you have your HDMI cord, you have your power cord. If you plug in directly, you have your Ethernet cord. I'm not sure if I'm missing anything, but anyway, all that can fit, and the consoles aren't necessarily cumbersome or big. I mean, the PlayStation 5's a little janky looking. It's a little big, but still they can fit in, basically a carry-on sized bag, wires included, and you can just bring it wherever. So I go home, I go visit my family a lot, and if I'm staying for a full weekend or a longer weekend where I don't have much, I know I don't have much going on, I'll bring my console down, and it's easy. I just, I can basically place it on any surface and just like bring my monitor down, and just plug everything in, and I'm good to play. It may not be like my normal setup. It could just be like a bar stool and like a countertop, but I'm in there and I'm gaming. And you PC guys, you can't really just pack up your PC and lug it around to wherever you're going. So I think that is a huge pro for consoles. Like I remember, Chris, you remember I brought my console to our friends, to the sorry, for for your bachelor party.
Yeah.
Our friend, yours.
Our
I
friend, you.
My friend who was you, by the way. I brought my Xbox and we played.
I know we all brought Xboxes, and you're right.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I'm just looking at my PC and I'm like thinking about it. It's like probably a good 30 pounds. And yeah, I'm not getting this thing anywhere, especially with all the wires I have plugged into it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Last time I moved, well, not into this place, but the last place, I shattered my ankle moving my PC.
Nice.
Absolutely just obliterated.
See?
It was not good.
See, that's just adds to my point. You're gonna break your body if you try to transport your PC.
But you wouldn't if you just brought the PS5.
Yeah,
that's a good point. The portability. All right. So next pro for consoles. I think this is a little bit of an obvious one, but the fact that you can get a very good premium gaming experience for these days, what, $400 to $600, we'll say. I mean, it varies, but it's a pretty specific price range. You either can afford it or you can't, right? But you know what you're getting, right out of the box, and you just know that for $500 I can play all the games that I want that come out. Whereas PC, you have to worry about there's different tiers of components, but you have to worry about if I buy this tier now, right, how long is that going to be viable for, and am I comfortable turning settings down if that's what it takes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the price, you're not going to, especially now, you're not going to build a comparable PC in terms of performance for $500 or $600. In fact, I don't even know what components you can get for $500 or $600. Like a case and a case and your RAM is going to be $500. So that's kind of where I stand with it. So it's still the cheaper way to get into gaming.
Yes, sir.
Derick, you're up.
Yeah. So I don't know if I really have one, but I want to call out the accessibility, right? So that's kind of the overarching thing, right? Plug and play is accessibility. We were just talking about is accessibility. Like anyone can pick up a controller and play.
Yeah. And you can just, hook a HDMI right up to your TV, right? You don't need to be worrying about DisplayPort cables and all sorts of stuff. You're right. You plug it in and you're just off and running. And there's just something to be said about the simplicity of that. Yeah, I agree. Ryan, what do you got for us? You can either do another pro, or if you're ready to start hacking up the consoles, which I am, let me know.
I mean, I got one more pro.
Okay.
And it's kind of, I mean, it's not something that console can really hold over PC's head too much, but I still think it's nice, and that is the backwards compatibility aspect of consoles. and there's not really, I would say there, you know, you don't, there's a good gap between generations where you can still play you can still play games that are maybe like 8 years old, or you can, like you can play games that are a little older on your newer consoles. Obviously, Xbox Game Pass has a bunch of classic original Xbox games on there. Oddly enough, I think isn't Game Pass available on PC as well?
Yeah, actually, I have it. It's called Game Pass Ultimate,
Yeah.
and for me, I think it's like 15 a month, and exactly, you get Game Pass on Xbox console, and you get it on the Xbox app through PC. The only caveat is the games that are on Game Pass for console are not always all on Game Pass for PC.
Hmm.
So I would say the console library on Game Pass is more robust than the PC version. But there's still quite a few, like the big heavy hitters are available. You're going to get your Sea of Thieves, you're going to get your Halo. So like all those things are available, regardless. So
And I just don't think there's as much FOMO in the console space as there is with PCs. Like, I assuming that I get the sense that there's always, like the next best graphics card or next best PC, whatever tech you all use.
the next
Wow.
Whatever the hell you're
tech.
using.
Wow, that guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I'm an expert, clearly.
Damn, brother.
No, but I just feel like there's a little less FOMO with console. There's not constantly a new a new console graphics card or a new generation of console coming out. Like I feel like there's a healthy gap between new console releases, which is good. And then you can still play, like if you have an Xbox One, which came out a while ago to this point, but there are I believe, maybe not as of 2023, but I know as of 2021 or 22, there were new games coming out that were still playable on Xbox One, and and that console I believe came out 2014,
2013 it came out. And yes, you're right. I think what we're starting to see, like the last game that I can think, like I remember paying attention to for whatever reason, is Hogwarts Legacy. It released on current gen consoles, like, on the release date, but I want to say it was fairly recently. So this is a few months after the initial release that it came out on like OG Xbox One. So like there's now, like you're talking about like a 8 to 10 year gap in the console tech between some of those models. So I think a lot of developers are kind of having trouble, putting it on the original Xbox from the get-go. I think they're having to do quite a bit of extra legwork to sort of scale things back. And, I would assume that like you're getting towards the end of its life cycle there, where, unfortunately games sometimes are sort of developed to the lowest common, sort of denominator there being, the weakest console. So sometimes I think that holds them back a bit. So it's a little bit of a gray area, and I think Xbox has sort of just done that to themselves by just having too many models or whatever you want to call it, too many SKUs. But yeah, absolutely agree with that point. I think for me, I think I'm going to kind of start with the cons.
Mhm.
I'm absolutely ready to I'm just kidding. I still love consoles. I would say, and this was a point I made about PCs as a pro, I think one of the big things is like cost of games for consoles. I mean, like they just upped the cost now, right? Like games are pretty much like $70. That's the norm for
it's like
quote
$72
unquote
now.
next gen.
Yeah.
And I just like I find like there's not a lot of sales on games. I think digital sales not so much. I think if you go into store you can find more physical sales. But as a primarily PC gamer, I haven't bought a physical disc in eons.
Mhm.
And I would have no desire to ever go back to that. So that would be a con for me, as I think pricing of games, because you don't have as much competition in terms of who's putting them out.
Yeah. one con that I'm thinking of is that consoles are frequently limited by what is common technology or mainstream technology. I think, we all remember plugging in the red, white cables into the back of the TV. And, eventually PCs started running on HDMI. And then after that, eventually consoles got HDMI too. And now that's commonplace. But, the more standards that are developed for technology normally hit the PCs first, and then, the rest of the tech sector later. So Absolutely. It's always like consoles are a step behind almost.
And you can even say that in terms of like some of the things we were talking about earlier, like resolution and like frame rate, right? Like, so it was 1080p, 1440p, 4K, right? And like, you're right, consoles were always behind. So they were 1080p while PCs were pushing 1440p. And now it's commonplace to see PCs pushing 4K, and consoles have started to get into 4K, but they're now getting into like more acceptable frame rates, right? Like the first consoles to do 4K were like, questionably hitting 30 FPS, which for a video game experience, like even 30 is not great.
It's not.
You're going to find people that call that acceptable. I don't think that that's acceptable. Like if a game was running at 30 FPS and I saw that on my PC, I would actually think that like my PC was on fire.
Yeah, something is broken. What I mean?
Yeah, well, like and seriously broken. So I just can't see where that's acceptable. But yeah, that's a valid point. I think, the consoles are a little bit further behind, but you do know by the time they get that tech, like it's really been fleshed out and it's like pretty smooth sailing. PC, there's a lot of pioneering and like beta testing, as a player, like, kind of, and early adoption, right? As a PC gamer, we're paying for that shit. You know what I mean? We're paying to be sometimes the first one in, and it's not always the best experience.
Yeah. Right.
Ryan, you.
Yeah.
He's like 0. No cons.
Yeah, I got no complaints. Console's perfect. No, I'm kidding. Let's see. I mean, I guess Derick kind of already touched on it, but the lack of options when it comes to settings, and especially if you're trying to be a competitive gamer, on a console, you're kind of at a disadvantage in a lot of ways if you're especially in the world of cross-play and cross-platform gaming, which is still kind of a newer thing. But, if you're on a console and, you're rocking, hopefully a steady 60 frames per second, playing against people that are, probably at least on 120 frames, and just a lack of, the technology is obviously not quite up to par, although it's getting there, like we said. But if you're trying to compete in certain games, and it's not all games, but so obviously certain games, there's the gap is more prevalent and obvious. But you're kind of at a disadvantage in a lot of ways if you're trying to compete against these PC master race players.
You're just really trying to meme us. You're trying to turn us into a meme.
It is true. I mean, you're right. It's an advantage, the fact that like, you can play with your friends despite what they play on. But you're right. I mean, when you talk about, and specifically like first person shooters, right? We're talking about like Apex, even Warzone, right? Games like that where you're trying to create a competitive scene. How do you match that? And I'll kind of take it a step further, and we can sort of branch off into this discussion real quick. But when you're competing on console versus PC, do you guys think that inputs play a factor there, right? Mouse and key versus controller. We sort of talked about it a little bit before, but how does that affect competitive balancing or integrity? What do you guys think?
I don't know if we have enough time for that, honestly.
I know. That's a big one.
That's a big topic.
That's a big boy topic. We could probably
do a whole episode on that, or at least half an episode.
We could. I would just say real quick, I think it creates a problem, right? Well, we can kind of leave it there. I think it creates a challenge for developers to balance. You see it in all the games. You got people bashing controller, you have people bashing mouse and key, and then you have people switching from mouse and key to controller because they're sick of this or sick of that. I will say this, in my experience, I have found mouse and key to be better for medium to long range gunfights, right? You have more precision. I do think that recoil control is much easier when you're using your entire arm on a mouse to aim. However, you lack the aim assist. So therefore, I think that controller input is better in the short range, close quarters combat kind of gunfights, with your subs, your submachine guns, or, even kind of like hip fire scenarios. So again, I don't know if you can balance, between the two, but it is, I think, a thing where like they each have their own unique strong suit, and they're both viable, just in different scenarios.
Yeah, I completely agree.
We'll get into that in a future episode, but definitely agree that there's pros and cons for each input, and it varies on the game as well. I want to say one thing before we wrap up here, and it's absolutely, completely unacceptable that Warzone, for the first 2 years of its lifespan, had no FOV slider on console.
Oh.
I literally did not play that game because it had no FOV slider for console. It's outrageous. It's a travesty. And honestly, Call of Duty should be ashamed of themselves for taking this long, because
that should be the only thing they should be ashamed of themselves.
That was my biggest complaint. Like, come on, like, why do I have 70 FOV while the people I'm playing against can shoot it up to like 140 FOV and can see like their peripheral vision is basically 180 degrees. Like, what's happening?
I remember playing with you guys and a couple other friends that had consoles, and I would literally be watching your like kill cam, or not your kill cam, your point of view.
Yeah.
And it uses my POV that I have set, and I'm like, yo, like, to your right, do you not see that guy? And like, you're like literally like, no, he's not on my screen.
I can't fucking see him.
And then like on my screen, he's like practically in the freaking middle of the screen. You know what I mean? Like this shit is like clear as day. So yes, that was a problem, but do you know why that was a thing? Like,
I don't. But
people need to talk about the reason why. It wasn't just like, oh, they're like, screw you guys. There's a hardware limitation there. I mean, to expand your FOV means the game has to literally render that much more visual information. So, you're talking about a game that's probably, running at 60 FPS tops. Now you put in an FOV slider, and then now it's running at like 25. You know what I mean? So again, consoles have standards, and they're not going to allow games to perform outside of, well, I don't know if there's standards anymore, but they in theory have standards, right? And they're not going to allow them to perform outside of those, that threshold. And I think that was a huge limitation. And as far as I understand too, with Warzone, seemed like you pissed me off now. Now you got me going on Warzone.
That's another episode.
As far as I understand with Warzone 1, that engine was not able to support, even though it seems, I guess, very simple, as it's just a feature. From what I understand, it was not able to support a console FOV slider, which, you guys got your FOV slider now, but the game's total dog shit.
I'm just not playing.
So thanks a lot.
Shout out to all the other FPSs on console that had an FOV slider back in 2020, 2021. Yes. Shout out Apex, who had one at day one in 2019. Day one, they had an FOV slider for console. Thank you, Apex. Love you. And Activision, you owe me money for all the ibuprofen and Advil to back the headaches.
Wow. You really shouldn't be taking that much, man. That's going to destroy your liver.
Oh my God, all the sick days you took from having vertigo. Yeah, it is bad. I mean, I think you showed me once or something, or I don't know how I saw this, but the console FOV was like so zoomed in.
It's like the standard, the settings, like the default setting 72.
70.
Or 70, something like that.
Just to think, like, people are playing on 120. You know what I mean? Like that it's huge. So
that is nuts.
maybe that's a topic for another episode. Is competitive gaming between the two platforms. I don't know, something we might be able to tease out.
Yeah,
but
we'll see who gets sweatier.
Do you guys feel? I think this is a good place to stop here.
I was about to launch into the outro, my boy.
Oh, you got it. Hit it up.
Yeah, so I've lost my mojo. I don't remember what I was going to say, but I'm sure this is going to spark a heated debate. If you're listening and you're a console person, I'm sorry. If you're a PC person, hello, how are you? We are 5 o'clock sweats on Instagram and Twitter. You can reach out to us there. Let us know your opinion. We might fight you, tell you you're wrong. Same thing with the YouTube comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can comment down below. We'd love to interact with you guys. And we are also available on Spotify. Am I forgetting anything else?
New episodes dropping Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, sounds right.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Cha feel. Cha definitely feel.
Yeah, Cha definitely feel. Stay sweaty.
Stay sweaty, fam. Peace
Didn't
out.
know if we landed on that or not. It just felt right in the moment.
I like it.
No, that's good. I like it. Yeah.